The Monster Hunter Wilds open beta has landed on PS5 if you have PlayStation Plus, soon to follow for Xbox and Steam PC. I've been on it all day today, playing through the demo, fighting all of the monsters available in the Windward Plains, and dabbling with each of the 14 weapons as well. The open beta features the full character customization we're going to see in the final product of the game. They already said that in advance, and we can edit our character and palico as many times as we want before the actual release of the game, with the ability to carry over the final design that we actually land on. The demo has you play through the first story mission up against the Chatacabra, then has you go hunt an Alpha Doshaguma, at which point it opens up and you can explore Windward Plains hunting a bunch of different monsters. I've been recording footage of all of the weapons up against mostly Chatacabras, but also Alpha Doshagumas, some Balaharas, and even a Raidao. I did mostly keep to the Chatacabras because they were quick and easy and let me get a quick overview of the weapon. I'm going to talk through how all the weapons are feeling to me, what I noticed immediately, and any of the cool changes in this quick overview format of all 14 of them. I'm Light It Up Dan. The sort of content I love to produce aims to reduce the overwhelm and unknown of the Monster Hunter games. You may have caught some of my event roundups or weapon overviews for Monster Hunter World, or even some of my previous Wilds coverage. The channel's currently sitting at around 80% unsubscribed viewers, with the majority of you returning from shorts or otherwise. If you enjoy the videos, do subscribe, and with that said, let's jump in. Starting us off with the poster weapon of the Monster Hunter games, the Greatsword. This wasn't actually the first weapon I took out, and the first thing I noticed is how goddamn strong it is in comparison to the others, which doesn't come as a surprise to anyone at all. It is the heavy hitter, highest single hit damage weapon. Although with that said, and this could just be an early game thing, or even an open beta thing, it's feeling like they've tuned down the TCS and tuned up the other attacks, so that not everything is banking on the TCS landing for this crazy powerful attack that gets powered up multiplicatively with the very high raw damage of the weapons and then all of the attack boosts, etc. I actually even noticed that the attack value of the weapon when you're looking at it is lower than the hammers. Kinda crazy, so maybe we're seeing some kind of shift with the Greatsword there. You're able to reposition your aim in focus mode for your charging slashes, including for the TCS. As this is a blocking weapon, you are able to initiate a power clash, which can proc when you guard just before a monster's attack, which then lets you go straight into a TCS right after. You can also try and time the offset rising slash, which can also be charged like the other slashes. And like all offset attacks, when timed against a monster's strike, will send them reeling backwards, and then sees your hunter do a really cool follow-up chasing attack. Your tackle, wide slash, and jumping wide slash are all there as well. And all in all, everything is just feeling really nice with the Greatsword. It didn't feel very difficult. With the additions to its toolkit, it doesn't feel as punishing for a new player, or up against monsters that you're not familiar with. Next, we have the fan favorite, the most popular weapon, the longsword. Oh boy, it's gone from overkitted in the previous games to, well, yeah, pretty heavily overkitted in this one too. One of the core differences that really stood out to me was once I got to red gauge, all of my attacks transformed and were called crimson slashes, dealing more damage and having multiple hits per input with a new animation. I absolutely adore this addition because it's no longer necessarily just this treadmill of get up to red gauge, do your spirit helm breaker, rinse and repeat. While it kind of is still that, you are incentivized and you're rewarded for staying in red gauge and just doing your regular attacks. It feels like not everything is riding on the spirit helm breaker, and what further adds to this is that you can actually cancel out of that. Once you've launched yourself in midair, if it looks like you're gonna miss, you can just cancel out, allowing you to retain your spirit gauge level. Your spirit blade attacks now act in a modular fashion and will respond to your directional input, which is pretty dope. It makes it feel more dynamic, giving you different variants of the spirit blade combo attacks, going in different directions for better upkeep and completion of the full combo. Another really sick addition is after you've landed the spirit helm breaker, you can do another input afterwards, which unleashes this flurry of crazy red slashes. Really nice additional damage, and it's just super flashy. Like the spirit helm breaker wasn't flashy enough. Oh, and if you just hold R2, you can charge up your spirit gauge and go straight into a spirit round slash after to go up a spirit gauge level. Yeah, that's pretty cool as well. Are you serious, bro? Wild's longsword is more of everything that everyone loves about longsword. It's sick. Next up, we have what I would regard as the ultimate weapon in World, the Sword and Shield. Also one of my mains in World, primarily the main Monster Hunter game that I've played. Gotta say, I wasn't really very hyped from what we saw from the weapon overview. It looked like a lot of the speed had been taken out of the weapon, and that it was going to play a lot more like Rise Sword and Shield rather than World, which does kind of check out. I'm happy to say that when I actually took it for a spin, it didn't feel particularly slow at all. I was chopping and slashing away, dealing an absolute ton of damage. The sidestepping in between your strikes can be pretty useful for staying on course, even if it does look a little goofy. Fully executing Perfect Rush will see you get vaulted into the air, a la Rise rather than World, and it looks like you can fully repivot the last strike of Perfect Rush, which threw me off. I kept missing it because of it. There's a neat attack you can do mid-combo called the Charge Chop. Got a cool animation, it's a pretty brutal looking attack and does a decent amount of damage. As the weapon has a block, you are able to initiate power clashes with it, which can activate when you guard right before receiving an enemy's attack. I did like Sword and Shield more than I was expecting to based off what I saw in the overview. While I don't think they should ever bring back Perfect Rush to the damage levels of World, I did enjoy that combo string, with the final attack being that latch on which you then fire away from. It does a ton of part break damage. Between your Perfect Rush and your focus strikes, you are constantly vaulting in the goddamn air. It feels like playing bloody Insect Glaive. Hey look, if that's what you dig and you want to be jumping all over the place with Sword and Shield, then you're going to absolutely love this one. Jokes aside, I really enjoyed it. I'm sure you will too. Next up, we've got the Dual Blades Date Bayo. Oh, Sasuke! These ones were pretty interesting, and we saw this from the weapon overview as well. A bunch of new things that looked quite different from the Dual Blades that we already know. Firstly, activating Archdemon mode by filling up the demon gauge is actually a useful thing. It's no longer a semi-demon mode when you go out of demon mode. This seems to give you an all-round power-up and perhaps access to different moves as well. A huge thing I noticed is when I was initiating the Blade Dance attacks is 1, they combo into more Blade Dance combo attack, and 2, you can actually do a side shoot combo into a Demon Flurry instead. I'm not too sure on the difference between these, and I noticed that going to and from them actually depletes your meter quite a bit. Perhaps the act of switching between Blade Dance to Demon Flurry and back again overall does more damage or something like that, hence why it uses up a chunk of meter. Either way, it's super flashy, you full on look like a ninja, it's so badass. The epic Heavenly Blade Dance has been moved into the Focus Strike attack, so now when you're using your Focus Strike against a wound, you'll follow up with that super cool Attack on Titan Captain Levi spin. No power clash or offset attack unfortunately, but it does have a perfect dodge. Perfect evading allows you to attack whilst dodging and also gives you a buff for a short duration. Go in, cut them up, build up your demon gauge, go into Archdemon mode, cut them up more, become the Hokage Date Bayo. Next up, we've got my main from the other games, Hammer. Like with Sword and Shield, I really didn't like what I saw with the weapon overview beforehand. I felt like both my mains had been done dirty. I'm very happy to say that actually playing it was super fun. It's Hammer through and through. The main differences that stood out to me is they've done away with the power charge entirely, so you only have 1 set of charging attacks instead of 2 sets. At level 3, you can initiate the Mighty Charge, which when fully powered up does the Mighty Charge Slam, a huge finisher, and you can also chain into initiating this Mighty Charge out of other combo finishers, like after the Upswing, which is also an offset attack if I'm not mistaken. I didn't pull it off, but I just recall from the weapon overview. The charge step you can do whilst you're charging gives you additional mobility and evasive maneuvers, all without breaking your charge. And in between your regular overhead smash combo inputs, you can actually sidestep, allowing for better continuity of your combos and perhaps even evading hits in between. Hammer really wasn't flashy from the overview at all, and it kind of bummed me out. And now playing it, even though it is simple and there's only a few things to it, I get it. They're enough. It's super fun. I mentioned this at the start with the Greatsword, but the actual attack value shows higher than the Greatsword. It's definitely packing a punch. It's dealing so much pain. Next, we've got the Hunting Horn. I absolutely love playing this weapon in the other games, and I was super excited from what we saw from the weapon overview. It has not disappointed. It honk, it bonk, it's very strong. The immediate huge change you can see is that you're able to place these echo bubbles down, up to a maximum of 3 at a time. When inside this gives you a buff, it deals damage over time to any monsters, and it resonates when you play notes or performance attacks, doing additional hits to the monsters. It's crazy strong and racks up damage so fast. We also see that performances have been streamlined, where the initial performance attack does differentiate depending on which directional input you're using, but the encore is always the same, a quick single hit in front. You can also input additional hits whilst your multiple melodies are playing out if you want to, which does make them take longer, but you do more hits and more damage. When placing an echo bubble or when landing a focus strike, you're able to queue up a bunch of notes to get some melodies preloaded. It does have an offset attack with the offset melody, which I believe can also be played during a performance too, as in it like interrupts the performance. This weapon was so much fun, oh my goodness. I dealt so much damage, I kept getting topples and knockdowns and wounds and part breaks, totally dominated the fights, honked the monsters to death, and had a blast doing so. Even if you've never played Hunting Horn one before, you absolutely have to give this a go when you get your hands on the open beta. Next, we've got another one of the woefully underused weapons, the Lance. Some pretty notable changes here. The one that really struck me is that there is no counter guard. All of your regular guards are now counter guards. When hit by a strike with your shield up, you will automatically shield bash as a counter, while still holding up your shield to guard, rather than countering with a jab and leaving yourself vulnerable. You can, however, after a successful guard, do a return thrust or a payback thrust. What used to put you in counter guard now puts you directly into the power guard. That's no longer a 2-input guard, you go directly into it. A couple more really cool changes. After you've done the 3 mid thrusts, you can follow up with this triple thrust jab, a really cool little combo finisher that does some pretty decent damage. And after the 3 high thrust combos, you can go into a charged counter by holding down circle, which looks like it's the old counter guard. This can be charged up to 3 levels where you let go and it does a big attack. As Lance is of course a blocking weapon, you will be able to initiate power clashes with it as well. It's feeling really nice, super fluid, very dynamic, a running theme with all of the weapons in Wilds. I think doing away with the counter guard is going to prevent a lot of accidental procking of it as well. It should just feel really smooth to play. Next up, we've got the Gunlance, which looked absolutely crazy from the weapon overview, and I'm happy to say they've delivered. It's pretty overwhelming, I don't even really know where to start. You can keep bobbing around using your shelling attacks whilst moving at the same time, dealing damage whilst also maneuvering yourself around the battlefield. After this, you can do the moving wide sweep, which is a gap closing frontal strike, swinging your gunblade horizontally, and is normally the final input of that slap lance combo that we know. You can just go straight into this with a gap close after just popping off some shelling. After either wide sweep, the moving one or the conventional one in the combo string, you can do the very flashy, very powerful Wormstake full blast, unloading all of your shelling in a semicircle above you, followed up with a Wormstake cannon, and then immediately into the multi-Wormstake full blast to then do it again. It's crazy. This combo loop was the main way that I found myself wanting to play the weapon as soon as I figured it out, but there's still the Wyvern fire, the burst fire after your overhead smash, going straight into an overhead smash after a perfect guard. It can power clash because it has a guard of course, and you can hold down circle to charge up your shelling to fire them all out at once as well. A huge overhaul to the weapon. It's an entirely new thing, and it feels so damn good. It's super fun, really mobile, flashy as anything, and packs a punch too. If you haven't played Gunlance much, this is the time to start. Next, we've got another weapon that thoroughly impressed me from the weapon overviews we saw beforehand. We've got the Switch Axe. This has also had a huge glow up. It's feeling super nice to play. All of the attacks in axe form feel way less clunky than they used to, much more fluid and dynamic. Whether that's the forward overhead slash or the fade slash, the implementation of them here just feels really clean. Taken from Rise, your attacks in axe mode recharge your switch gauge, allowing you to transform back into sword mode quicker, giving you this really cool bouncing between the two modes. In addition to how clean the axe is feeling, sword feels super nice as well. After the Heavenward Flurry combo finisher, you can do an unbridled slash, or if fully amped, the full release slash. Zero-sum discharge was still there, but do you really want to use it when you can do this stuff? I mean, come on, it's cool as hell. You can do the offset rising slash in axe form, repelling the strike of a monster backwards and then following up with an attack. This one's not so hard to pull off. You can time this one quite easily compared to other weapons. And there's also the sword counter stance you can go into, the counter rising slash, giving you a whole ass parry stance for sword mode. Switch Axe is eating so good. You have to give this weapon a go. I had so much fun with it. This might even be my new main. We've got some big changes for this one too. Next up, we've got the Charge Blade. There's a really interesting shift here to use the elemental discharge combos a lot more than you used to. They are now the core bread and butter of the Charge Blade. Not only that, but you are highly encouraged, highly incentivized to activate Savage Axe Power Axe mode. Not only can you hold down the attack for additional ticks, I don't think I did this at all, but that's from Rise, but it also lessens your file usage for all of your attacks that expend files. You can only get into Savage Axe after a perfect guard or when using your focus strike to pop a wound. You can now also supercharge your files to double charge them, making them deal even more damage so you get more bang from your buck for your file expending attacks. So you've got this really interesting switch, this new dynamic for the weapon. You want to double charge your files. You want to be activating Savage Axe, which is done very dynamically depending on how the fight's going. And your core bread and butter combos are your elemental discharge attacks. Yeah, you still got the SAED, which you can initiate afterwards, and it still does a ton of damage, but that's almost like an afterthought now, and it feels like it's a waste to use up all your files like that. You can also go into your Savage Axe from your mount finisher, and I can't quite recall if you can activate it after a power clash, but you can do a power clash as this is a guarding weapon. Charge Blade is feeling very powerful. It really packs a punch and has a lot of impact behind it. it. Very flashy and fun. If you liked it in the previous games, I'm pretty sure you're going to absolutely love the Wilds version of it. Next up, we've got the Insect Glaive. This looked sick from the weapon overview, and it feels really good. This weapon might have just turned the core loop on its head too. The notable changes from the get-go is that when you're in focus mode and you do your regular attacks, you will extract essences at the same time with your Kinsect with your swings. Your Kinsect will go out and mimic your attack that you do. This felt way more involved and intuitive than just aiming and firing your Kinsect, which you can do, and the reticule will even tell you which essence you'll get depending on what you're aiming at. When you're fully charged up with all 3 essences, 1, 2, 3, red, white, orange, you can hold down circle to charge up this attack, the strong descending slash, a powerful spinning slashing attack, which you can then follow up with the rising spiral slash, a goddamn Final Fantasy ultimate finisher move. It is ridiculously anime and cool, consuming your 3 stored essences, but your Kinsect will go absolutely crazy and smash all around the place, gathering up more essences for you from the attack anyway. You can also no longer bounce yourself up in the air constantly, but look at the stuff that you can do. Why would you want to? Other than those core changes, I did find it quite difficult to do the descending thrust. I know it's in Wilds and you can do it, but I just couldn't really figure out how to. I'm sure I won't be the only one that gets tripped up on that, and you can let me know in the comments how you guys went about it. All of the regular combo attacks are feeling really good, whether you use the triangle combos or the circle combos, and combined with the new changes implemented here, the weapon feels amazing. Onto the ranged weapons, we've got the light bowgun, but when you want to rapid fire, you'll rapid fire rapidly. We were told that the 3 ranged weapons were amongst the most changed ones, and they were telling the truth. The loop feels very different here with those new gauges that they have. For the light bowgun, we've got the rapid fire gauge over here. When activating it, an ammo drum is attached to the weapon, and all of your attacks do more hits, giving the rapid fire function to any ammo. If you already have rapid fire, it makes your rapid fire more rapid. You've got really good mobility in this mode and for the weapon as a whole, but specifically in the rapid fire mode, you're able to do the sliding reload, where you dodge after expending your ammo and do a reload that way. Your regular shots will charge up the gauge so you can go back into rapid fire mode, and if you do the chaser shots in between your regular attacks, that will charge it even faster and it deals more damage, but it's a little bit slower. The focus mode strike turns it into a grenade launcher, and oh my goodness, it is so powerful. Focus strikes only really have the juice behind them when you're actually attacking a wounded monster on its wound as well. That's true for all of the weapons. I was getting out some thick damage with these bad boys. You can also place a Wyvern Blast on the ground, which will proc every single time you or the monster attacks. All in all, it's feeling super good, really fluid, very dynamic. Again, a running theme with all of the weapons here in Wilds. But LBG is feeling very strong. It's definitely separating itself from HBG and bow. Next, we've got the slower, meatier version of the LBG, the heavy bowgun. This too has a new gauge and also has seen a lot of changes. For one, the shield mod is now integrated into the weapon. That just comes as a standard. You will auto guard attacks in front of you, and you can even go into a guard stance as well. The gauge is called ignition mode and sets up your weapon into a rapid firing machine gun. This was called Wyvern Heart in the previous games, I believe. Whilst holding this down and continuously firing, the power will increase as you continue to hit the target. You can also hold triangle to charge up a Wyvern counter ignition. I didn't actually do this, but it's an offset attack for the heavy bowgun. It can only be done during ignition mode. I was just busy going full freedom. So it's got an offset attack, a special gauge you can go to and from, which is very powerful. You can auto guard and initiate power clashes because it's a guarding weapon, and the focus strikes are these powerful sticky bombs, but again will only really have any juice behind them when the monster's actually wounded. It's feeling pretty sick, and I didn't even try out the different ammos for both of the bowguns. That probably changes the dynamic of the weapons a little bit more too. You can let me know in the comments how you found that. Last but definitely not least, this thing has had some mad changes as well. I mean, Jesus. We have the bow. The huge change here are that coatings are a part of the weapon's mechanic that are tied to this new gauge, the trick arrow gauge. You consume this gauge like you do with the bowguns by doing your special attacks, either by loading a tracer arrow, which is a homing beacon that you place on the monster, or by applying your coating. Here you can see you've only got 8 power coatings. It's not the 50 files that you bring in at the beginning of the hunt like before. Did I just skip over the fact that you've got a tracer arrow? Yeah, you get a tracer arrow. All of your attacks, including Dragon Piercer, will home in on the tracer arrow until it explodes. Arc Shot is actually pretty useful here now. As well as doing the AoE damage over time on the monster, it will stick these explosive arrows into the monster, which can then be detonated with Thousand Dragons or with your focus strike attack. The bow has a perfect time evade called the Discerning Dodge. Not only do you take 0 damage damage when you execute this, but you replenish all of your stamina, or lots of it, and you get a bunch of trick arrow gauge back as well. So they've taken all of the pain points of the bow previously and given us a very fun, satisfying solution for them. Skilled play with a bow is heavily rewarded, and I absolutely love that. I am definitely going to be playing this weapon some more. That's all 14 weapons covered in a brief overview for the changes that really stood out for me. Were there any that I didn't quite cover? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you. As mentioned at the start, the channel sitting at around 80% unsubscribed viewers, with the majority of you returning from shorts or otherwise. If you enjoy the videos, do subscribe. We run open sessions for the various Monster Hunter games over on our Discord and on the live streams on Twitch. I will leave all of these links for you in the description. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you in the Forbidden Lands.